If you've ever been deep in a PlayStation game, lining up the perfect shot, sneaking through an enemy base, or driving toward the finish line, and suddenly your character starts moving on its own. No, your controller isn't possessed, that's stick drift. And if you own a PlayStation 5 in the United States, there's a very real chance you've experienced it. Millions of gamers have. A $70 controller, slowly becoming unusable, because the joystick decides to move when you're not even touching it. But here's the big question. Is controller drift actually fixable? Or are we all stuck buying a new controller every year? Today on TechVibes, we're diving deep into the real repair methods for PS5 controller drift, the ones that actually work. We'll break down why it happens, what Sony doesn't talk about, the repair techniques professionals use, and whether fixing it yourself is worth the risk. Because once you understand what's happening inside that controller, you'll realize something surprising. Stick drift isn't just bad luck. In many cases, it's inevitable. And that changes how you should deal with it. The PlayStation 5 launched in the United States in 2020, and almost immediately the DualSense controller became one of the most talked about pieces of gaming hardware ever made. Adaptive triggers, advanced haptics, a completely redesigned feel. It was one of the most innovative controllers in years, but not long after launch, something else started trending: controller drift. Players across the US began reporting the same problem. Their character slowly moving forward, camera spinning on its own, menus scrolling without input. At first, it seemed like a small issue, but over time, the reports exploded. Gaming forums filled with complaints. Repair shops started seeing more broken DualSense controllers. And by 2021, lawsuits had even been filed claiming the controllers had a known design weakness. Now to be clear, stick drift isn't new. Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons became infamous for it. Xbox controllers have experienced it too. But with the PS5, the frustration felt bigger, because the controller wasn't cheap. In the United States, replacing a DualSense can cost $70 to $75, and many players were replacing them far sooner than expected. So what's actually going on? Why do these controllers drift in the first place? And can they truly be repaired? To understand stick drift, you need to understand what's inside the joystick. Inside every modern controller stick is a tiny component called an analog potentiometer module. That module reads the position of the joystick using small mechanical sensors. When you move the stick left, right, forward, or backward, tiny contact points inside the module slide across a conductive track. That movement sends electrical signals to the console. Those signals tell the game exactly where your joystick is pointing. It's actually a clever design, but it has a weakness, because those components are mechanical, and mechanical parts wear down. Every time you move the joystick, those contacts rub against the sensor track, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. Eventually, they degrade. Dust gets inside. The contact points lose precision, and the controller starts detecting movement, even when the stick is centered. That's stick drift. And here's the part many gamers don't realize. Many controllers across the entire industry use the same joystick module supplier, which means the lifespan of these components can be surprisingly limited. Some estimates suggest the joystick modules are rated for around 2 million cycles. For casual players, that might last years. But for competitive gamers in the US playing daily, it can wear out much faster, especially in games like Call of Duty, Fortnite, Apex Legends, and sports titles where the sticks are constantly moving. But wear isn't the only cause. Dust, pet hair, skin oils, and microscopic debris can slip inside the joystick housing. That contamination interferes with the electrical readings, and suddenly your character starts walking across the map, while your controller sits untouched. But here's where things get interesting. Because not all drift problems are permanent. Some are, but others are actually fixable, and the solutions range from incredibly simple to surprisingly complex. Let's start with the easiest fix, the one many gamers overlook: cleaning. Yes, seriously. A huge number of stick drift issues come from dirt buildup inside the joystick housing. Over time, tiny particles sneak under the rubber stick cap and settle around the sensor mechanism. This can disrupt the electrical contact inside the potentiometer. The result? False readings. Many repair technicians in the United States say cleaning alone fixes a significant number of drifting controllers. The most common method involves using isopropyl alcohol. The process is simple. You gently pull the joystick to one side, apply a small amount of alcohol around the base, then rotate the stick in circles to allow the liquid to seep into the mechanism. After letting it dry for a few minutes, you test the controller again. In many cases, the drift disappears. But here's where it gets serious. Cleaning only works if the problem is contamination. If the internal components are worn down, cleaning won't help. And that's where deeper repairs come in. Some gamers attempt a slightly more advanced fix, controller recalibration. Sometimes drift happens because the console has stored an inaccurate center position for the joystick. Recalibrating resets those values. Unfortunately, PlayStation doesn't offer a built-in calibration tool on the PS5 like some PC gaming software does. But connecting the controller to a computer and testing it through calibration tools can reveal exactly how far the drift is. In rare cases, resetting the controller or updating firmware can slightly improve the behavior. But usually, this is only a temporary fix, because if the sensor is physically worn out, software can't repair hardware. And this leads us to the repair method that professional shops use most often: joystick module replacement. Inside the PS5 DualSense controller, the joystick assembly is soldered directly onto the circuit board, which means replacing it requires desoldering tools and experience with electronics. Repair technicians remove the old module, clean the solder points, and install a brand new joystick component. Once done correctly, the controller functions like new. This repair is actually very common in independent repair shops across the United States, and it's often far cheaper than buying a brand new controller. But there's a catch. Opening the controller requires careful disassembly. The DualSense is more complex than older PlayStation controllers. Inside, there are ribbon cables, trigger assemblies, haptic motors, and delicate components. One wrong move, and something else breaks. That's why many gamers choose to send their controller to a repair shop instead of attempting it themselves. But here's the part nobody talks about. Even replacing the joystick module doesn't guarantee drift will never return, because the replacement part is usually the exact same design, which means the wear cycle eventually starts again. And this leads to a bigger conversation happening in the gaming world right now: controller design itself. Across the tech industry, engineers are experimenting with a different joystick technology called Hall effect sensors. Instead of using physical contact points, Hall effect sticks detect movement using magnetic fields. That means no mechanical wear, no friction, and theoretically, no stick drift. Several third-party controller companies have already adopted this technology. And some gamers in the United States are starting to prefer those controllers specifically because they resist drift. But major console manufacturers have been slow to adopt the design. Why? Cost, manufacturing changes, and compatibility concerns. Still, many experts believe Hall effect joysticks could eventually become the standard, especially as consumers become more aware of drift problems. But until that happens, millions of gamers are stuck dealing with traditional joystick modules. Which brings us to the big debate: are PS5 controllers flawed, or is stick drift simply unavoidable? The truth sits somewhere in the middle. On one hand, the DualSense controller is packed with advanced features: adaptive triggers, advanced haptic feedback, motion sensors, touchpad integration. All of this adds complexity, but complexity can also introduce more failure points. On the other hand, joystick wear has been a reality in gaming for decades, from PlayStation to Xbox to Nintendo. No mechanical sensor lasts forever. For many gamers, the real frustration isn't that drift happens, it's how quickly it sometimes happens, and how expensive replacing controllers can be. In the United States, gamers collectively spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year on replacement controllers, which is why repair culture has started growing. More YouTube tutorials, more local repair shops, more gamers learning how to fix their own hardware. And that shift might actually be good for consumers, because once people realize controllers can be repaired, they stop treating them as disposable. But there are still two sides to the conversation. On the positive side, repairability means controllers don't always have to be replaced. Cleaning fixes many cases. Professional repairs restore functionality, and replacement joystick modules are inexpensive parts. For gamers comfortable with electronics, fixing drift can be a satisfying DIY project. But there are downsides too. Opening the controller voids warranties. Soldering repairs require skill, and some drift problems come back over time. For casual players who just want to jump into a game without worrying about hardware, that can be frustrating. And it raises an interesting question. What will controllers look like in the future? By the end of this decade, controller technology could look very different. Hall effect sensors may become more common. Modular joystick designs could allow easy replacement. Manufacturers might create controllers specifically designed for repair. There's also growing interest in modular gaming hardware, where components like joysticks can be swapped without soldering. Some prototype controllers already use this concept. Imagine buying a controller where a worn joystick could be replaced in seconds, like changing batteries. If that becomes mainstream, stick drift could become a minor inconvenience instead of a $70 problem. But until then, gamers still need practical solutions. So, what should you actually do if your PS5 controller starts drifting? First, try cleaning the joystick with isopropyl alcohol. It's simple, safe, and often effective. Second, reset the controller and check for firmware updates. Sometimes software can slightly improve responsiveness. Third, if the problem continues, consider professional repair instead of immediately buying a new controller. Many repair shops in the United States fix stick drift for a fraction of the cost of replacement. And finally, if you're buying additional controllers, it may be worth researching models designed with drift-resistant technology, because understanding the hardware you're using is the first step to making it last longer. At the end of the day, stick drift isn't just a random annoyance. It's a small engineering limitation inside one of the most advanced gaming controllers ever built. But once you understand why it happens and how it can be repaired, you're no longer stuck replacing controllers every time the problem appears. And that's something every gamer should know, because the next time your character starts moving on its own, you might not need a new controller. You might just need the right fix. If you enjoyed this deep dive into gaming tech, make sure you subscribe to TechVibes for more breakdowns of the technology behind the devices we use every day. And I want to hear from you. Have you experienced PS5 stick drift? Did you fix it or replace the controller? Drop your experience in the comments below. And until next time, stay curious and keep riding the wave of tech vibes.